All right, as we begin today, we're going to be starting down in Romans chapter 6 and in verse 12. But as we start here, we have a 35-minute class, and so we don't cover too much material. And so we have to go back and review just a little bit so that we really know what we're talking about. Now, as you start out here in verse 12, why he starts out with sin, but we need to remember what Paul is dealing with, what he has said. Now, the book of Romans is about salvation by faith through Jesus Christ. And his enemies, the Jewish people, will use this and show, and they've already presented arguments to show, well, if Christ will forgive me of all of my sins, then it seems like that I ought to sin more and more and more so that I can get more forgiveness and more grace from Christ. And so Paul is now addressing that particular thing. In chapter 6, here it is, he brings up the subject. And we don't want to forget what he's talking about. He starts out in 6:1. He said, "Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound?" Now then, that's the argument they give. So now that he's going to ask the question, and then he's going to answer the question. Now, in the very next verse, he starts out, and he says, "God forbid." No. Then he makes a general statement. And this general statement that he makes is going to be what he talks about all the way through chapter 6 in the book of Romans there. Thank you, Mitch. Just set it down right there and I'll get it. Thank you. Now, this is a question that he's talking about. And his whole point is this, that when we became a Christian, we died to sin. In other words, something actually happened. Now, he said, if we died to sin, how shall we any longer live therein? Now, here's the point that he's making, and it's a point that I'm afraid that we all forget from time to time. And that is, when you become a Christian, something actually happens. You don't just go through some motions, and then 1 minute you are, 1 minute you're not. But something actually happens. Now, if becoming a Christian were as dramatic as this, let's suppose in order to become a Christian, I had to shoot you. Steve, come up here. He wants to become a Christian. So he comes up, I pull out my .45, pow, right through the heart, and he drops dead. That would impress you, wouldn't it? And you would think about it, if I say anybody else want to become a Christian, you'd think about it. Well, I'm not sure. Roger says, yeah, I will. Pow! Now we got 2 dead people up here. That's impressive. And it's something we would think about. And when we went out this afternoon, if somebody's talking and they said, well, I wonder what Steve and Roger are going to be doing this afternoon. You'd look at them and say, they're gone, they're dead. Well, where do you suppose they're going for lunch? No, they don't live here anymore. They are dead. We would understand that. Now you say, what's your point? My point is, that is really what happens when you become a Christian, except it's not physical death. You don't take a pistol and shoot somebody, but you do die. In order to become a Christian, you must kill the old man. And he talked about that last week. You must kill the old man. You must take that old sinful person, that person that you have been all of your life, fulfilling the lust of the flesh, doing whatever you want to do, and you must change your life. You repent. You change your mind. You kill the old man. This old sinner is not going to live as a sinner anymore. And you become dead to sin. Now, what do you do with a dead person? Well, you bury him. Now, tomorrow the funeral's going to be for Steve and Roger. It'd be a somber thing. we'd take him out and we'd bury him. When we bury him, that's it. In the afternoon, somebody says, well, wonder what Steve and Roger be watching the ball game tonight? No, they're through. They're not living here anymore. They're dead. Well, the same thing is true with becoming a Christian. And this is Paul's whole point. And this is what he's dealing with in the first 11 verses. That when you are dead, you're not alive anymore. Now you're dead to sin. And so then you're buried in the waters of baptism. You come out to live a new life. So his whole point is that when you're dead, you don't live in that anymore. So let's just look now here in verse 11 as he closed it up last week. Even so, reckon ye also yourselves to be dead unto sin, but alive unto God in Christ Jesus. So his point is, something actually happens. You become dead to sin, and now you're alive to Christ. You're living in Him. Now, if you become dead to sin, you don't live in sin anymore. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Physically, we understand it. Physically, it's impressive. But is it that impressive when it comes to becoming a Christian? When somebody becomes a Christian, they actually stop, they change their ways, they're no longer living in sin, they bury that old man in the waters of baptism. He deals with this in the first 11 verses. And then you're raised to walk in newness of life. So now, that's going to be Paul's whole point all the way through this particular chapter. So with that in mind, let's keep this now in our mind. In verses 3 through 11, Paul answers the question why we shouldn't remain in sin. We're dead. Now, in verses 12 through 14, he tells us what to do with sin. All right, now here's a problem that we've got. It's a problem we wouldn't have with Roger and Steve if I shot them. We take them out, we bury them, that's it. They're not around us anymore. We don't have to worry about them anymore. They've gone to live in another place. Now, when somebody becomes a Christian, they're dead. They're dead to sin. But the problem is this. They're still living in this world. They're still living here in this world, and sin is all around them. But they're not living in sin. They're dead to sin. But sin is still living all around us. So we say, okay, what do I do? Now here it is. I become a Christian. I have totally changed my mind about sin. I have quit all of the sinful things that I have been doing. I have totally dedicated my life to the service of Jesus Christ. Now then, let's get on with life. Well, as we get on with life, there's still sin around us. So now, Paul's going to tell us, you're dead to sin. That's what he said in the first 11 verses. You're dead. Now, here's what you do with sin. Because sin is still around you. You have to do something with it. What are you going to do with sin? That's what he's going to deal with now. So he said, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body. Now, he's telling you, don't let sin control your life anymore. Don't let sin be your master. Don't let sin be your king. Don't let sin reign in your mortal body. Now, this is what we're going to be dealing with the rest of the time right here. Don't let sin reign in your mortal body. He's going to make an interesting thing again that we need to always keep in mind. He said that you should obey the lust thereof. Well, what do you mean, Paul? Don't let sin reign in your mortal body. I become a Christian. I've separated myself from sin. Now, what do I do with sin? All right, I am not going to let sin reign in my mortal body. Okay, that's easy said. How do I do it? What do you do if you don't let sin reign in your mortal body? Well, we would understand it in any other realm, but in this spiritual realm, it's hard for us to understand. If I were, here you got two masters. Let me make another illustration. We're in the middle of an election. And so here we've got, in here, the people running in here. Some are totally dedicated to the Democratic Party. Some are totally dedicated to the Republican Party. Whatever the Democratic Party says, that's what this person is going to say and do. Over here, whatever the Republican Party says, that's what this person is going to say and do. We see it on TV all the time. We're going to uphold the party, whatever the cost. Now then, let's suppose that here it is, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. And now I'm going to kill that. I'm not going to let those principles rule my life anymore. I've changed. It used to be I'd take my mortal body and I'd go out here and I'd preach all the Republican principles. I would use my mortal body and I would pull on my billfold and I'd give them my money. I'd give them my time. I use my mortal body to serve the Republican Party. Now something happens. Somebody convinces me and converts me. And they say, boy, that's all wrong. The Democratic Party is the right one. Okay, I sever myself from this, and I go over here from this. Now then, it says, if somebody says, I said, now what do I do? Now I'm not a Republican, I'm a Democrat. Well, they would say, Lowell, now then, let's read it here. Let not the Republican platform reign in your mortal body. We don't understand what that means. I said, well, what does it mean? He said that you should obey the lust thereof. Don't you obey? This is the key I want us to see. What do I do from here on? I don't obey anything they say. Whatever they say, I don't obey it. They're not going to be my king. They're not going to control my life. I got me a new king. I have me a new life. And it's going to control my life. We understand it if we're Democrat or Republican. We understand it if we are a Frenchman or an American. We understand it in every realm. That's what he's saying here. Now what he's saying is in this spiritual realm, we have to understand, in this spiritual realm, we're living in this physical world, but we have a spiritual king. In this physical world, if I obey my physical desires, all you got to do is just go out and find any person that says, okay, I'm going to do whatever I feel like I want to do. Whatever I want to do, that's what I'm going to do. What kind of life are they going to live? When you fulfill your physical desires, you're going to be obeying sin. So what he says is, now you've got to take your mortal body as Christians. Now here it is, I am now a Christian. Now I've got to take my mortal physical body and I've got to do something with it. And so I've got to make up my mind. Now my body is going to obey somebody. And it's not going to obey sin, that you should obey the lust thereof. Neither present your members unto sin as instruments of unrighteousness. So I'm not going to present my members, my hands, my feet, my tongue, as instruments of it. Let's go back to what I said a minute ago. Back here, when I used to be a Republican, I presented my members. I used my tongue. I used my hands. I used my feet. I used my body to do what that party wants. Now I'm changing, and now then I don't give my hands and my body. I don't do that anymore. Now then I give my hands and my body to this. That's what Christ is saying. That's what Paul's saying. Paul is saying, now you were converted out of sin into Christ. Therefore, something is happening to your mortal body. Now, it's not just automatic. When people become a Christian, a lot of times they say, oh, I became a Christian and I don't have any desire to sin anymore. I don't have any desire. I mean, sin now has been taken away from me, and the only thing I want to do is no desire to sin. Just mark it down, that is not true. Your mortal body still wants to be pacified the same way that it used to be pacified. And you have to make up your mind. Now, right here, I've introduced a new thought. And here is where Paul is introducing it. And that is, he is making a distinction between you and your mortal body. Now, he's saying, here it is, your mortal body can be used in one of two ways. It can be used over here as instruments of sin. You can steal, and you can lie with your tongue, and you can express your anger and get mad and knock people down. You can spend your money and go get drunk, whatever you want to do. Over here, you have these instruments of sin. But now over here, you now have killed that old man. Now you still have these instruments. Now then you have your hands and your feet. Now, what are you going to do with them? Okay, here's the key. He's making a big point. Up here, you are. And you, up here, in your spirit, that's the real you. You are going to make the decision. Just like if I were converted from a Republican to a Democrat. It's me who makes the decision. I say, I'm no longer going to do this. I'm going to do this. So Paul now is making a distinction. There is a distinction between you and your body. This is so important throughout the whole New Testament that he's going to dwell on it throughout the remaining part of this chapter. He deals with it in many other places throughout the New Testament in making this particular distinction. Here's what we've learned so far. You were in bondage to sin. Now, to become a Christian, you died to sin. You then were buried, and now then you rose out of the grave to be alive. And you're going to be alive with Jesus Christ. That's what we've learned so far. So now, let's see now how he says it here. And we're only going to be able to talk about, really, these two verses here. He said, let not sin, therefore, reign in your mortal body, that you should obey the lust thereof. Neither present your members unto sin as instruments of unrighteousness, but present yourselves unto God alive from the dead. So now then, you have to make a decision. Well, let's see what this decision is. Here it is, we've got this guy now who is a Christian. He's alive unto God. So now let's talk about him. We're not going to be talking about a sinner now. We're going to be talking about this Christian. He repented of his sins. He now has changed his life. He now is going to determine, I'm going to serve Jesus Christ. Okay, I want you to notice here that he makes this particular distinction in here. I'm running away from myself right here. He's going to be making this distinction that here it is that you have what Paul otherwise calls the inward man, and that's you. That's you. And then you have your members, which is your body. Kind of hard for us to understand, but man, if it took 1,000 years for us to comprehend this, it would be worth it. There's you, and there's a place where you live. And that's what he's talking about. And there's a big difference between you and your mortal body. But there is a big difference. The Lord teaches that people can kill your body, but they can't kill you. Your body will die and it'll decay, but you will be living eternally. There is a vast difference between you and your body. Today you drove up here in an automobile. Now, there's a vast difference in you and your automobile. See? Vast difference. And yet, when we look, you know the kind of car I drive, and so you look at it, and you see that little black thing coming with the dirty body all over it, and you say, there comes Lowell. See? Well, what you're really saying is, there comes Lowell's car that he is in, see, that he is driving. But we don't talk that way, and rightly so. Now, when you see me, you'll say, oh, I saw Lowell. No, you've never seen me in your life, see. The only thing that you've ever seen is you've seen my car and you've seen my body. And my body is not me any more than my car is me. See? And this is a point that Paul is wanting us to see. And it's important. If we're going to be totally dedicated to serving Christ, we're going to be totally dedicated to being the kind of person we have to be, we have to understand this distinction and really meditate on it and believe in it. Let's look at some statements. Here it is, Paul said in other places. He said, I pray that you may be strengthened with power through His Spirit in the inward man. Now, when Paul prayed that Christians would be strengthened, he wasn't talking about going down to the gym and building up your muscles. He wasn't talking about somebody who is the strongest in his body. He could care less about that. He said physical exercise is good for a little, but spiritual exercise is good for all things. And here he says, now I pray that all Christians will become strong, that you will be strengthened in here. The Holy Spirit will be able to strengthen you in the inward man. That is what will be strengthened. In 2 Corinthians 4:16, he said, wherefore we faint not, but though our outward man is decaying, yet our inward man is renewed day by day. Boy, here's a big distinction. He said, now we've got two things that we look at. Our outward man is decaying. Doesn't make any difference how old we are. You are less of a physical specimen today than you were yesterday. See? We are decaying. We're going downhill. Yesterday I saw Brett Boone, who used to play for the Mariners on the news. And I thought, hey, that's interesting. I haven't heard from him for quite a while. And so it got up there that he's retiring again. Well, when he was out here, when I knew him, he was just a young man. And now then it says, and so at 39, he's trying to make a comeback, but he's totally shot. He's tried it, and you can't do it when you get to be an old person. 39. Well, we don't see that with our eyes, but you see it in sports, and you see it in all things physical, that, 25, you reach your maximum. 26, you're not quite the person you were when you were 25. Even Scott back there at 27, he's running downhill. Now, he says a lot about me being older than he is, but let me tell you, he's an old man. He's heading downhill. See, he's 2 years past his prime. I want to emphasize that. Now, here it is that we have this. This is just true, see. It's just true, but we can't see it in there. But now, you decay, and you decay, and you decay. And people like me, when you ask me, Lowell, how do you feel? I feel like I'm 40. Well, do you have any aches and pains? No, I'm just great. I feel as good, as I did when I was 25. You know I'm lying. See, there's no getting around that, because the Bible says your body is decaying, but your inward man is strengthened, and it's renewed day by day. That's the point Paul is wanting us to see. When God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him, male and female created He them. Now God created us after His image. Whether you're male or female, doesn't make any difference. He created us after His image. That's not physical. He created man. male or female. Then he gave man, male and female, he gave them a body to live in because they were going to live here upon this earth. And so he made a body for them. He made a body for man to do one thing, made a body for woman to do another thing, but both of them are made in the image of God. The real you is made in the image of God. There. Peter says, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in the incorruptible appeared of a meek and quiet spirit, which in the sight of God is of great price. So he's telling a woman what to do. Rather than to think that you're going to be judged by mankind and God by what you wear and your outward appearance, and we give a lot of attention to that, don't we? Don't do that. But make sure that you adorn your inward man. That inward man, that spirit. Throughout the Bible is just full of this. And it wants us to understand that really is what we have. We got an inward person and an outward person. Paul said, we also all once lived in the lust of the flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind. So I said, that's the way that we lived. And we were just like other people. Yeah, that's what people do. The inward man, they obey their flesh until finally they come to the conclusion, I will obey Jesus Christ. I'm going to do what he would have me to do. In Ephesians 2:3, but we also once lived in the lust of the flesh, doing the desires of the flesh. And we got over here, you think about it. Sex, power, pleasure, comfort. You look around, why do people want these things? Is it because of your spirit? See, no, that's not it. It's the physical, the physical body that you've got. And so the Bible makes a big distinction between you and your body. Perhaps the best place is in Mark chapter 7, verse 21. There he goes to great length, Jesus does, in showing that you watch your mind. You watch your mind. And he says now, starts naming them out. Fornications, thefts, murders, adulteries, coveting, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, evil eye, railing, pride, foolishness. Just name them. Here's a whole lot of them that's in there. He says they all come from the inward man. They come from the inward man. And he's showing the difference between watching what you eat and watching what you say. And he's showing that we put a lot of emphasis on what we eat, but what we eat is just feeding the physical person. But what we say is coming out of the inward person that we have put in other ways. We put it in by the five senses, by hearing it and reading it and seeing it and so forth. But he said, now these are the things that really defile an individual, that which comes out of the inward man. So he makes a big distinction. And here is something that really a central verse that summarizes the whole action of mankind. Now we say, what are some of the major verses in the Bible? And if we say, what's the golden text? Everybody says, God so loved the world. Yeah, that's the golden text. That summarizes everything about salvation. How should we treat our fellow man? Well, now don't get windy. How should we treat our fellow man? Well, as you want to be treated, you treat them. Well, that summarizes it all. Now, what kind of a person are we? What kind of a person are we? Here it says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Just like that. Whatever you think, the kind of person that you are on the inside, that's the kind of person you are on the outside. And there's no way to get around it. No way to get around it. So it's that inward person. And this is what Paul is dealing with. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to take that inward person, that outward person, and you let the inward person control it. And don't you let the outward lust of your flesh be in control of that. There's where we must close today.